Cool. All right. So, hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Gabby Bradt, and I'm the Fisheries Extension Specialist for New Hampshire Sea Grant and UNH Cooperative Extension. And Mike, you want to introduce yourself too?
Sure, yeah. I'm Mike Coogan. I'm a research assistant professor at UNH as well.
So, Mike and I initially just, well, I'm the only one named Mike, and Mike Coogan, Mike Chambers, and Mike Doherty and I had sort of this idea right around when the EE Blue Aquaculture Literacy Grant RFP came out a year and a half ago, I guess. At this point, came out, and I said, you guys, I think that we should do a podcast, having no idea at all what that entails. So we all kind of jumped on the bandwagon and submitted something, and we were lucky to get funded for this 1 year aquaculture literacy grant that started that we were funded for from I guess this September 23 24 to July this year. And so this talk is basically about, what we did, how we did it, was it fun, was it not, etc. So, and then Mike and I are going to sort of take turns through the presentation. And Mike, when you're ready to have me forward the slideshow, I will just say next if you want. All right. So developing and piloting an aquaculture podcast to enhance aquaculture literacy. Um, we decided that we wanted to do this as a limited edition or limited series podcast because we weren't quite sure, how it would go and where the funding would come from. So the reason we wanted to do it was primarily because in this business, right, we realize that there's um, a lot of people who don't really know anything about it, and sometimes it's in their backyard and have no clue what it means. And and the other idea was not only to bring aquaculture to everyone, and sort of demystify it, right? Like if you haven't heard about it and or if you've heard only negative things about it, not really understanding what it was all about or in context, we thought maybe we could have a hand in expanding that literacy. And in general, two key obstacles to aquaculture expansion in the United States are these negative public perceptions. Primarily from misinformation, big highlights, from the news that say, look at this horrible thing that happened in Indonesia type thing. So we wanted to really get on top of that, and just again, sort of an overall lack of information on the topic of aquaculture. Additionally, there's also a lack of readily accessible information on the opportunities here in the United States. And also for opportunities for people to just sort of get to know it and ask questions and make better informed choices on, what do they want to do with their lives? Is it even really a career? And all the way also to making choices about sort of the food that they are choosing, so sustainable seafood choices and so on. And then we also really wanted um, to have a hand uh, in combating this misinformation within the general public, while at the same time increasing awareness and then hopefully more support for the growth of the industry. So why is this not going forward? All right, so just want to press, and please let me know if you guys can hear all this.
Can't hear anything. You might need to reshare and then check the little box that says reshare with sound. Oh, you're muted now, Gabby. That's okay.
Love text difficulty. Sorry. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. I think that's my AirPods. So hang on. My apologies. All
It's
right.
okay.
Try again. Um,
If we want to be really resourceful, I can just play it off of my phone.
Ooh, that's true.
hmm.
I
Let's
think
see
it's
if
just
this.
our intro, yeah?
To Get Aquaculture, the podcast where we dive into the deep end of the world's
Yes,
fastest
no?
food industry.
Yes,
In this
great.
podcast, we invite industry professionals, researchers, and educators to bring you inside the systems that make up modern aquaculture. So whether you're a curious eater, a coastal neighbor, or someone who likes to nerd out about ocean science, we're glad you're here. Hey there, and welcome to Get
Sorry.
Aquaculture.
Oh my goodness. Gotta love it.
Mm.
So
All
this
right.
will be you, Mike. Sorry.
No, all good. All good. I will also say that I've gotten very tired of hearing my own voice since trying to listen to these episodes and being critical. It's funny every time. But you can see, it came out pretty good. We've got it was not a huge grant, but it enabled us to purchase all the equipment that we needed. We all got some professional mics. We had some producing equipment, and turns out it is not a very expensive uh, it's not a very expensive thing to do to actually produce a podcast. It's a bit of upfront costs, but what really ends up taking a lot of time is the producing of it. And so we got a lot of help with that. So just a little bit about what we did. So we produced 8 episodes total. It was a limited series, and we tried to cover a really broad range of topics. Um, this is for people like a lot of us listeners right now in this chat that some of us have. Would you say, Tony, 40 something years of experience? Other people are brand new to this. And so we wanted to sort of cater to everybody. And maybe we should touch on a little bit about ourselves. I've been in the aquaculture industry for just over a decade, more officially, and then, like many other people in this industry, sort of did it part-time in various different ways for many years before that. And if you want to learn more about us, more in depth, the intro pilot episode sort of dives into how we got into aquaculture in the first place. Because as many of us know, it's often not a straightforward path. A lot of us came from different other careers, and there's a lot of space for all sorts of different skill sets and experiences within this field. So we sort of dive into how we got our start in aquaculture, what sort of research we're doing today, what we've done in the past, and then sort of how anyone else can get involved. And so yeah, like I mentioned, I'm a research assistant professor at UNH. We do a lot of IMTA, or integrated multi-trophic aquaculture work, so growing multiple different species from different trophic levels. For example, steelhead trout, blue mussels, and sugar kelp, all in the same system. And then looking at what our environmental impact is. I'm doing a lot of bottom culture of sea scallops, which everybody loves, and trying to find sustainable ways for us to grow a lot of seafood domestically, and a lot of high value seafood, and also sort of um, support existing fishermen and fisheries, because we know that the sort of all over the world, but our focus in the US, there's a lot of fishermen that are struggling. Our small vessel fleet is shrinking. The graying of the fleet is very, very much real. So that's something that I and my team, Michael Chambers and Mike Doherty and Gabby and all of us focus on. And just to introduce the members that aren't here, Michael Chambers is a research associate professor at UNH. He actually brought me to UNH about 3 years ago. And Mike Doherty is a project manager and also involved in Sea Grant as well. And so, yeah, we basically, as Gabby mentioned, we started this project last year with sort of a vision, and we, in our proposal, gave a bunch of ideas of who we wanted to interview, what sort of topics we wanted to interview. If you look at that second bullet point, we've got really, really broad-ranging topics, and that was the idea. Fish, super broad, ornamentals, queen conch, a little more specific, diversity in aquaculture, seaweed. We didn't want to dive too nitty gritty or too deep into it in our first season. We're going to get into some more specific topics in our next season, but we wanted to, have sort of like a long form conversation based podcast. We're obviously not the first aquaculture podcast out there, but what I found in a lot of the ones that already exist is they're really catered to people within the industry, and they get very, very specific to a lot of those concepts. So we wanted to bring people in, like Gabby said, sort of bust some myths, um, show people what it takes to grow a lot of these species. You know, we're not going to provide all of the steps that it takes, but we do want to tell you like how these different species are grown, what sort of capital investment it might entail to get into it, and how other people that might not be biologists or engineers or water folk can get involved as well. You know, we need marketing people, um, we need processors, we need everybody in this. Social media is huge. Yeah, so we produced these eight different episodes. They vary anywhere from about 20 minutes to about an hour long, or a little over an hour. So some of them are pretty long, and they really start off very, very broad. And then as the conversation progresses, they get a lot more specific, and we touch on all sorts of things. We try and be kind of funny. We make some jokes, all that jazz. And we provide content sheets in each one, so you can check back. We provide resources in the description, so you can, uh, dive back in after you've listened to the podcast and try and learn more about some of the specific topics that we covered in there. And so we've released our first podcast this past August, and we started off by releasing three of them. We, found out that was the best thing to do. I guess I should jump back real quick. We first started it just over Zoom. I think Michael Chambers and I did the first one, and we had interviewed this guy Marsden Brewer, who you'll see he's a scallop farmer, and you don't see scallops up there, and that's because that podcast turned out pretty terrible, and it was nothing against him. It was actually a really great podcast, but our audio equipment was terrible, and we didn't do all of the checks that we needed to do. We didn't slow things down. There were a lot of lessons in that first podcast that we learned, and we sort of just had to scratch that. So we have to jump back into another scallop episode in the future. But we realized that we needed a bit more professional or semi-professional help. Fortunately for us, there's a really cool program called the Doyle program I believe it's just in New Hampshire, but
Yeah,
Gabby, you
it's,
can correct me
yeah,
if
New
I'm
Hampshire
wrong.
State Grant. Yep.
Yeah.
It's our Doyle Fellowship. So it's internship for the summer. Yep.
Yeah, and so it is it's fully paid for, so we can get a sort of uh, early career person to focus on one particular subject. And there was somebody that was working for Sea Grant, Talia Krechko, who is really interested in production and media in general. And then Brian Urastis, who is the communication specialist, I believe, at New Hampshire Sea Grant. He has a lot of experience with just sound, audio, and so he basically sat us down and was like, you got to get your act together. You need to do this, 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 and this. You need to send, content sheets before. You have to get people to sign waivers. We were really like guerrilla warfaring this thing. And so he
We're
sat
like,
us
what?
down.
Content sheets? What's that?
Yeah, exactly. We got to do this legally by the books. And so from then on, we were a lot more professional about it. And you can see in when you listen to it, the audio typically sounds pretty good. Um, and as I'm doing right now, sometimes we ramble, and that people don't want to listen to you rambling. The stories are great, but the nobody wants to listen to like 2, 3 hours of podcasts typically. And so we tried to cut things down and really have the meat, the full content in there. And so, yeah, we have now released 8 episodes. We've done our best to promote them on LinkedIn and other pages, and we released them every other Wednesday, and just finished releasing our last one a few weeks ago. So, Gabby, we can keep moving forward.
Okay.
So yeah, here are our 8 episodes. Gabby, do you want to take this?
Yeah, sure. So part of the learning curve for us was, it's one thing to just sit and interview people and, and then get some help getting it produced. But then we're like, okay, well, we don't even know how we publish it. Where do we publish it? Can UNH help us do that? Do we have to pay for it? Luckily, Brian was also very helpful, and we worked with UNH Cooperative Extension because I also work for them. And they already have a platform called Transistor FM, if anybody is interested. And through the UNH license, we were able to host and publish this podcast. And so, with the help of Dave Kellum from UNH Extension, he set us up on it. And when all of the episodes were finalized with content sheets and pictures and links and everything, he ended up uh, putting it on this platform, and it's available on pretty much anywhere you can hear you listen to your podcast. But the beauty of this platform is that it provides a suite of statistics. So all those analytics that everybody is always, talking about, impressions and listeners and downloads and so on, we can get, as on a daily basis, basically. We can get access to those numbers. And so I think that provides a lot more insight of where we're reaching, how we're reaching, the number of people we're reaching, the number of countries. That's, I think, one of my favorite things my favorite statistic there. But it even breaks it down to things like within the first 30 days, this particular episode received this many downloads, and it does it downloads per episode per day, per however, many days you want to look into. So, I feel like that is a really great tool that hopefully we can use those metrics as we try to look for, longer lasting funding mechanisms. But so we also, in terms of each episode, like you can see, they're variable in length. We don't know if people like that or hate that, but it keeps you guessing. And we also were trying to be very simple with our names, with our titles, and definitely give us feedback. Because like that's a dumb title, or I like that title, or status quo type thing. That we wanted it to be, pretty under, people, okay, this one's going to be about seaweed, this one's going to be about, finfish or whatever. But maybe we needed to give more detail and so on. But we wanted it out, and I think for the time being, for our first attempt here, I think we did pretty well coming up with 8 episodes. And from the previous slide, we did 7 episodes with experts in the field, or practitioners and so on. But then we also, our last episode that we released a few weeks ago featured sort of, aquaculture in the classroom. And it featured students from the Seacoast Science Center Marine Biology Fellowship Program. And it was sort of a live roundtable discussion. And we had pizza as part of the day of the recording session and so on. And I felt like that was a really fun one to do. So anywhere that you listen to podcasts, look us up, and it's Get Aquacultured. Let's see. This one's you, Mike.
All right. So this is what we've got so far. On that map, you can see we've sort of touched all over the world. We're in 6 continents right now, everything but Antarctica. So if you know anyone in Antarctica, scientist or otherwise, or human or otherwise, let them know that Get Aquacultured with an exclamation point is out. We'd love to tack off that 7th one. But yeah, we've had over 500 downloads now as of 2 days ago, I guess, when we put this together, in 29 countries. And if whoever that was wants to jump on, I don't know if we have, yeah, I'm looking now. We don't have Nigeria on there as well. So please join, both of you, and that'll make it an even 30 plus. And we've had over 11,000 impressions on LinkedIn. So it's been growing, and we're getting a lot of eyes on this podcast right now, which is great, and hoping to get a whole lot more. And these analytics that Gabby was talking about are really important, right? If you look at the total downloads, down on the bottom left, you can see, Queen Conch, who would have thought? But that was our most viewed podcast that we've had so far, followed by Fish. And you can sort of see that in general, these like very, I don't want to say more sciencey, but I guess more hard specific topics seem to do a little bit better. I mean, minorities in aquaculture did incredibly well, but we also had Imani Black, who's just like such a dynamo and everybody loves her. And so that was an easy one. And then if you look at the first 30 days, that gives you sort of a better idea of what people might be interested in. Those early few episodes have been out longer, so it would make sense that they have more total downloads at this point. And what we found is that you really want to advertise them well. And so when we did on LinkedIn, on social media in general, try and keep it fun, keep it exciting, throw like a little tidbit at the beginning. Something like, do you want to start a kelp farm? Do you know where your fish comes from? Do you know half of seafood that we eat right now comes from aquaculture? Something like that, some sexy headline gets people excited. And so, yeah, just so far, pretty happy with what we've got so far, and we've also learned a fair bit. You look at some of these other ones, ornamentals, which I thought was such a cool episode, might not have as many views, and I think part of the reason is a lot of people, especially non-fish folk, don't even know what an ornamental fish is. Uh, and I think that's something that we have to think about in this next season is coming up with maybe better names. I don't always love like the super cheesy pun type names, but man, they seem to be a big hit. And the Seco Science Center one hasn't grown to that level yet, but it does seem like over time we are getting a lot more views. And Emily loves the short titles. Okay, sweet. Thank you. There you go. We appreciate the feedback. Yeah, we can keep moving.
Okay. Okay. Oh, and so the other part of what Transistor gives us is okay, it's kind of, it gives us a little bit more insight on how people are listening to us. Are they listening to us through their computer and headphones, or mostly through their cell phones or mobile devices, and which platforms are being used the most. And so basically everybody's on the move, right? So everybody's using their mobile apps or on their phone, and a lot of it is Apple Podcasts, and then Spotify. And then I didn't even realize that we had that many podcast platforms, but apparently we're all over. And so, the other thing that I will say is if you notice the spikes on the bottom graph here, it's usually they seem to spike right around when we do the releases. So, which also makes sense. A new episode came up, so then people are downloading it and so on. So, again, it seems like a lot more people are listening to us on their cell phone and through headphones, which also makes sense, or driving in the car and so on. But I think that that's also a really cool thing to know, because then it would also help us in terms of, okay, if you are, if you are doing other things, maybe having it a bit of a longer format is better, or maybe not, because people will then stop listening to you. So more things to sort of delve into as we get into season two. So. And then I just, you know, we haven't been out there for very long, right? So 2 months, give or take. And basically the key themes from reviewers or from people who, have reached out to us about the podcast is that it's informative and educational, and that we are engaging with very well with content and the guests that we have. We're objective, and we are doing our best to myth bust when appropriate, and it's digestible. So one of the things that all four of us really wanted to do was to make it chill, right? Like have it be, sort of nice, conversational, fun, not super jargony and so on. And I think that helps. And I think a lot of the personalities that we've had on the podcast have been great, and it's been really easy as a give and take. The other thing that we figured out really early on was that even though there's four of us and we're all co-hosts, having four people in a podcast is just too much. So we take turns, depending on the topic or the guest. It's usually two, either, it's one mic and a Gabby always, or two mics. And basically we have the lead host and co-host, and whoever proposes the topic is basically the lead host is responsible for, sort of doing a little bit of the background research and reaching out to guests and so on. And then the co-host is a supporting role. But just really quickly, I had someone text me and um, she was very excited about the podcast, and she said, "I'm just listening to your podcast with Mike." And I was like, "Well, do you like it?" And she said, "Yes." And then there was some more on that conversation. She's like, "I didn't know we did all this stuff," which was also pretty cool. And then someone else just recently reached out and wanted to, talk about maybe starting a kelp farm, and had been listening to us on, the podcast. So, we are maybe, small amounts here and there, and we haven't been there that long, but these are some of the impacts that we're already starting to see, which I think is really fun and exciting. You're up, Mike.
Cool. Yeah, and I'll also say that we wanted to do just starting with the guests that we have. I will say, being in the industry makes it a lot easier. Pretty much all of the guests that we've had are sort of friends of ours and people that we've met in our, many years in the industry. And that's nice because it does keep it conversational, but we've also, had a couple people that I haven't known on there, and that also keeps it fun. But doing the research beforehand and knowing a bit about your guest goes a long way to keep the conversation flowing and to, have the guest see that you do care as well, and you've done a little bit of background on them. Also, what's very critical is, writing. We certainly don't have a script, but you want to do some. It's not just giving them a call and starting the podcast, press and record, and let's see how this goes. We always have a good dozen plus questions that we have written down in the first place, topics that we want to cover, but try not to go too overboard with that. Still keep it sort of light and conversational. We often don't get to all the questions, and that's totally fine. It's amazing how quickly you can reach an hour or longer when you start talking about things that you're really fascinated about. And I'll also say this, I don't think we touched on this, but most of the podcasts that we've done have been over Zoom. And thank God that we have that resource right now and that it's so common and everybody uses it, because you can record a really high quality audio podcast over Zoom at this point. And there are some other types of software that I think are more specific to podcasts, but this worked just fine for us. So as far as our next steps, and just some cool pictures on the side. That's Jacqueline Robideau, and that is her Jeep license plate Eat Kelp, and she's the Maine extension specialist, seaweed queen up in Maine. Amazing podcast, amazing person. And then that second one, that was our Seacoast Science Center cohort, and so had a great time talking to these kids and picking their brain and seeing where the next steps are. And that was an awesome episode. Just, I don't know about, I don't have kids at the moment. I certainly don't have teenagers, but I never interact with, teenagers at this point. They're like there's like a wall
Different
between,
breed.
they are a totally different breed. And if I do, it's usually in, a few minutes sort of passing by conversation or something short. And it's great to have a sit down where you're talking to them for, an hour plus, and you can sort of break down those walls and get into what's in their head and see what their thoughts are on the world and, how they feel like they can contribute. Like, they had some amazing ideas and they have some amazing experience and ways of thinking that are so beyond what I have. They're the computer generation and grew up totally different. And, I could never think of like making aquaculture cool with a TikTok video, but they certainly can. So as far as next steps go, though, we want to, we'll continue collecting this analytical data because we just finished our last release a few weeks ago. There will be a lot more data coming in over the next few months, and that'll sort of inform what our next steps are for season two, what seems to make this most sense, what people are really interested in, and trying to grow our audience through social media posts, through webinars like this. Thank you so much, Emily. And then we really want to add a couple of new things to our season two. Uh, you know, and before then, sorry, real quick, is do some summary episodes. I think you're probably sick of hearing Gabby and I talk right now. but have some short and sweet episodes that aren't an hour or an hour plus long. Try to use the content that we already have to make some smaller, maybe 20-minute segments that people can really just like get a quick grip on those particular subjects and not listen to us for too long. But as far as season 2 goes, we have a bunch of guests and topics lined up right now. We still haven't done an oyster episode, which is crazy. We're going to redo our scallop episode. We want to cover, you know, uh, island aquaculture. We want to cover, you know, the sort of history of aquaculture and indigenous aquaculture in the United States. There are so many cool topics that we haven't even touched on. Obviously, get our production ramped up to the next stage, and then bring our listeners into the fold. Some things that I've seen some amazing other podcasts do is, get some questions from listeners. If we already have our recordings lined up, which I think has been really important for us, is not to try and scramble at the last minute and get a new episode out, but try and get at least half of our episodes fully produced before we start releasing any of them has been very helpful. So in that case, we know when we're going to release, and at the end of that episode, we can say, all right, next episode is going to be, on lobster aquaculture. If you have any questions, shoot me an email and we'll ask the guest that time. And so it's a good way. It'll be a cool way to get our guests involved a bit more and see what they're actually most interested in, and bring in some really cool questions to our guest. And I think we're good there. And then lastly, oh yeah, this is so nice.
Yeah, so part of also, the tech with podcasts is, we wanted to provide those content sheets, which, are extra resources and also transcripts. And I sort of took that on, and can I just tell you what a time suck that was? And then I found this other um, app, I guess it is. It's called Whisper. And it basically took, for example, Amani's podcast was 90 minutes long. And the first time I tried it on this free service took me 3 days and it wasn't any good and so on. So I had given up. It did this in a minute. It took 90 minutes of podcast material and transcribed it in a minute. It was fantastic. But the other thing that it does, it also helps to pluck out really cool content that you can use for social media, or, it pulled out testimonials that were relevant for different episodes. And I just wanted to, give you an idea of some of the quotes that it pulled out that we have been using for our posts and things like that. So, there's a lot to be said for it's not just, interviewing and putting out a recording. It really is a way to engage with the public in a different way, and get a lot more out of that recording, that can also be shared. And I think that is also part of the mission of this podcast, right? Is to just sort of, increase literacy and connections and stuff about aquaculture. So it's definitely been a really cool, fun learning experience. And, even as a co-host or host, we're still learning a lot. There's a lot of really cool things that having this experience with our guests has been very cool for me. I've learned a lot more. I mean, I'm not growing anything currently. I make people eat the stuff, but for the most part, it's also a really great educational tool for everybody involved as far as I'm concerned. Um, and I believe that's it. So thank you for listening to us, and scan our QR code and share the podcast, and hopefully you'll all hop on and have a listen. So thank you.
I just tried using that QR code and it looks like it's been deactivated, even though I made it yesterday.
Okay, I
But
didn't try
but
it.
if you want to find us, just look up Get Aquacultured. Um, there you go. Thank you, Emily. You can
No
click on that
problem.
link right there and find our podcast and listen in on wherever you listen. So really
And we've got
appreciate
lots
you.
of time.
Yeah, we got plenty of time. If anyone has any questions.
Any questions? I'm not mind the.
I'll start with one. I'll break the ice. And everyone know that you can just raise your hand and unmute to ask questions now. This is really going to be more of a discussion. So Mike, you'd asked me before this how I found out about this podcast, and as I was listening, I was remembering why. So part of it is I follow Gabby, but part of it is through the Southeast Aquaculture Communications Collaborative that I'm coordinating. We're making a website that's going to pull all these resources for the general public and for consumers. That's more lay information rather than jargonful information. And you have so many great episodes on Southeast Aquaculture. You've got Dan Benetti and Megan and all the folks down here. So I was wondering, is there any other audiences that you're trying to reach? Are you doing any amplification out to educators in the classroom? What can we do here as different stakeholders to help you get this podcast farther?
All of those things.
Yeah.
So I think, part of the EE Blue grant criteria, like what they wanted to do was we had to partner with not only industry, but they really wanted us to partner with informal education centers. And so our partner, the Seco Science Center, the one that had the marine biology fellows, is a really neat mini aquarium information informal education center. And so we are working with them to try and spread the word about the podcast. And initially we had hoped to do like our first live podcast there, but things just were getting very complicated and with schedules and trying to book places. So that's another thing. We had a lot of ambition of how we wanted to do this. And but realistically, money, it takes more money if you're gonna, book a venue and have, a lot of people come, et cetera. But that's one. And then I think that's also another reason why we had some school teachers on the podcast so that they can also spread the word. And we were saying, look, this doesn't have to be something you just listen to. Like, your teachers are doing it. And so hopefully they're helping to spread the word as well. Go ahead, Mike.
I mean, no, you covered most of it. I just saw Jack say, have you considered local community radio stations as a potential way to disseminate your podcast? No, and we definitely should. We do have a UNH radio station that we should take advantage of, but we should probably go more than local as well. It's been very much word of mouth and social media so far. So yeah, we have to find more creative ways to do it. Like we're going to be at a UNH hockey game soon and going to be tossing out packets of smoked trout. But it's been pretty much like guerrilla style to try and get this out. So we need some more creative ways.
Well, we were also thinking too, I mean, we have a lot of ideas. Executing them is going to be interesting. But the Mikes and I have talked about, what if we did like an on-site podcast when we're at a conference, like NACE or Aquaculture America or something. And, that would be awesome because there's all these aquaculture professionals there. It'd be really cool to just sort of, bring a mic around and talk to people that way. But then we're also thinking there's other podcasts out there that do the joint video and podcast thing. So maybe have it also be put on YouTube and things like that. So, but yeah, essentially spread the word for right now if you can. Be great.
Hmm. Good point, Jack. Yeah. And, coming up with more creative guests as well. Maybe not potentially just industry members, but if we can find somebody that's a little more well known in the public that wants to learn more about it and have sort of a live session with somebody like that. Someone that already has a big name. We need some famous people. Because a lot of the ideas we have right now, we're sharing them with aquaculture representatives or people within the industry already. And as much as we're trying to meet and interact with a lot of those people, the real big goal of this was to find the general public. And so I think sort of like Jack, what you were talking about, promoting it in public stations and uh, yeah, any place in the public would be an advantage rather than just trying to target our small bubble that we have. Tony, you have a question? You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I do. This is all great discussion, and I've been president of CAA, California Aquaculture Association, for seems like decades. Sometimes you get in a position, everybody, thinks you're doing a good job and won't step up, but I'm okay to do that. And we've had these discussions for years about how to promote aquaculture and that sort of thing. So you're on the right track. The thought I had was, what's your presence going to be at Aquaculture America? I know last year there was quite a presence, and there were some folks there that were, letting people know that you're there, and you may have even had a couple of sessions. Do you have any plans for Aquaculture America in Las Vegas this coming February?
As Get Aquaculture or us specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I know everybody has things they're doing there, but as a group and to promote your podcast, like you were saying, seeking out some live podcasts from the conference or whatever, what might you, any thoughts on how you might approach that as a group and as information disseminators at the conference?
We haven't gotten that far, but we're both going to be there. But just sort of off the top of my head is we can send out emails, tell people we'll be there, and I don't know. I think maybe we'll just we're going to wing it. This is sort of our forte sometimes, but.
Okay.
But I think initially I had thought, well, maybe we could do like a poster session or something, but none of the stuff that I was thinking of was really going to work in terms of connecting with people and interviewing them. So I think it'd be kind of fun to really just sort of say, hey, we're here, and then go talk to people, go to different sessions, and then have people put people aside and interview them that way, and then splice things together. But Mike.
Yeah. Right.
Anything off the top of your head?
Yeah, I think there's one opportunity that may come up. I'm in charge of a day of programs, mostly centered around California, but California has so many species and so much going on that there's a lot of interest in what we're doing from all over the nation and the world. So we're going to be putting together a day of talks, and we're in the process of doing that now. And we have as always, you've got to pick and choose and pick a program. There might be a spot for you there to give a short 15-minute presentation. I think there was one at the RAS conference in San Diego that kind of told what you guys were up to and what's going on. And I'd be glad to entertain that and throw it into the mix and see if there's a spot for you there and whether it fits into what the theme is. We're going to be developing that in the next week. We have a group of people that want to speak, and we're putting it all together. So I think my website was on there. Contact me through the website or contact Michael Lee at the California Aquaculture Association directly. I think you can probably find his email somewhere, and you can copy me and copy him in the next today, because we're looking at finalizing and putting the program together next week. And if I got a spot for you and it fits in, then you're welcome to say a few things about what you've done and what you're doing, kind of like this. Because what's interesting to me is seeing your numbers and how it compares to the numbers we do. In other words, where's the interest in aquaculture? Is it in marketing and production? Is it this? Is it that? And so the numbers you're showing me on your podcast, it's great to compare them with others and see if it tracks the same way. And I know there'll be others there that are looking at that. So a little bit, you'll have more data then on more web. And just simply saying this is what we've done and this is the results would be very interesting, because it's going to let people know where the areas of interest are from a really broad group. I mean, it's aquaculture, it's just not the public. But we're doing some work on the West Coast, and we're surveying, consumers on what they think about aquaculture and what their opinion is and that sort of thing. And I'll have to say, yesterday I was disappointed. I picked up my grandson at school. He's 9 years old, and I said, "Okay, you were there all day today. What did you learn today?" And he said, "Well, I learned that, salmon that are grown on farms, they put dye into the feed and to make the meat pink. So, with all the talk about dyes and even him and his family are backing off of that, and it's in the news, we know that what's put in that feed is natural. It's keratin from natural sources. It's not some kind of orange dye number 3. And so he had the opinion that farmed fish were dangerous to eat. So that's really serious when that's going on out there. And so we need to find out what people's opinions are on seafood in general, not just aquaculture and seafood. And so comparing those numbers to what we get from that study would be really great to see what the groups do. So I'll leave it at that, and contact us and we'll see what we can do for you.
That'd be great. Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, at the very least, I'll be there, and I'm always everywhere that I can be. And if I can help you in any way there to introduce you to people or to move things along, I'll be happy to do that. That's kind of my role at this point. I'm very, very busy in my business, but moving what I know and the people that I have contact with onto somebody else in a new group is where I want to be right now, and mentor and transfer information that I've learned sometimes the hard way.
Great. Thank you.
Will do. Do you have what was the name of your session that you're going to be having?
Yeah, it's a California session, and I think it's opportunities in California aquaculture, and then we may have a session in the afternoon that's going to look at national research priorities, and we're going to have people that are going to be visiting there from all the regions, because what we want to do, it's just not me, CAA, but another group of us wants to bring the regions together. The Western or the regional aquaculture centers, there's regions that you may be aware of, the research areas around the nation. I was involved in doing a review of all of those, and one of the things is they need to talk to each other more, and they need to engage, states need to engage, because this group has done that and learned that, and this group is trying to find out what that is, and if they just get together, they could solve a lot more problems together. And that's what you're trying to do, is bring people together. And I did that through, I used to engage with a lot of state and federal hatcheries in California. There's 38 of them. And I'd go to one and they had solved a problem. I'd go to the other end of California, which California is big, and they're trying to solve the problem. I said, why don't you call your people up in Northern California? They solved this already. There's no need to be trying to solve it again. And so I kind of interconnected the group, and they have meetings together that they talk about what they're doing at their particular hatcheries, disease, production, feed, production, all the stuff that they need to talk about. It was pretty interesting. Just doing that got that whole thing started, and it really did make a difference in the way the whole system worked.
Thanks, Tony. Feel free to address, there's a question in the chat. Feel free to address it there. I just want to open the floor in case anyone else has any questions. I know I have some, but I'm going to hold them for a second because I want to make sure everyone gets a chance.
People are eating lunch.
I know, they're listening. It's a podcast. So I think that was great feedback from Tony about ways to reach further. Being a Florida Sea Grant, but also doing a regional hub where a lot of your guests are from our region. I also just want to remind you that you don't have to do it all yourself. If you have 3 podcasts about Florida, let's, collaborate on creating some more materials to amplify it out to our audiences, or, maybe get extension agents involved because they're interfacing with the public. Working on a regional project, I know it's difficult because our Sea Grant programs are state focused. So when you're doing something that's outside that scope, it's kind of unfamiliar territory. But that's something that we can help with. And I really do think even just having little swag like stickers at NAA or Aquaculture America would be awesome, because multiple different tables could hand that out. I mean, you're working with partners across the nation.
That's a great idea. And stickers are cheap, and everybody loves stickers.
Exactly. I was like, if you can get in the little bags they give us with all the information, that'd be awesome. I don't know how you get in those bags, but even just giving them out to people, and I would definitely wear one at a conference. And you could have them on the tables. I mean, sometimes people are meeting in hotel lobbies. You could just hand them out to the people that are just having casual conversation or over cocktail hour. I also wanted to touch on something that I think is really interesting about your vision for season 2, which is getting questions from the audience. I think that's an awesome idea because a lot of what we do with aquaculture education and making resources is kind of giving them information, but not hearing their questions, hearing where they're coming from, and all of that really helps us. So I'm curious about how you're thinking about doing that, and if that's another opportunity for collaboration that we even could, multiple secret programs could put that in their like Instagram story where people can literally submit questions about a topic. Um,
And I, I mean, I think um, Wisconsin Sea Grant has their Dr. Fish or whatever their podcast is, and they do that. They do solicit questions through social media, so through YouTube or Instagram and so on. And I feel like wherever we're sending out or advertising that the next episode is coming up, that's how I think that for us in term, this is like a side gig, right? So as much help as we can get from anybody on social media to spread the word, that'd be great. I do know that the one thing we haven't really thought all the way through is how are we going to collate all those questions. But I'm wondering if it might be one of those things. If you have questions, here, fill out this form, and it all comes, like a Qualtrics, and it all comes into one file. But I feel like that is probably the easiest way of soliciting questions. Yeah, I mean, we definitely have to have a sit down and a planning session. So that should be on our, on our agenda to look into. But
Great, that's awesome. I am gonna close out our meeting. If we don't have any questions, if you have any last minute questions, please type them in the chat or unmute. I want to make sure they're answered. But my other thought was also reaching out to associations because you do a product focus, and a lot of the associations are product focused. So that might be another good way to get it out in a newsletter, or reach out to the NAA. They might be interested since you're national, in putting that out to all their different industry members. So there's just a couple pieces of advice, but
great.
happy to
That's
partner with you guys here in Florida. So I just want to close out this meeting by saying thank you to Gabby and Mike for presenting. This is my first webinar hosting and their first AIE webinar, so it was really fun to learn with you guys. This is going to be recorded, like I said, so I'll be posted on the AIE YouTube account, which is Aquaculture Information Exchange, and it will be posted on the AIE. If you're not currently a member of the AIE, it's completely free to join. Like I said before, it's a community of aquaculture stakeholders. Was first focused on the US, but now has expanded globally. So anywhere in the world you can join and network and collaborate with other aquaculture industry folks. So that's all for me. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for having us. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye.